Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Israel, and this is Parashat Varim. The affairs. Parashat Varim could be found in the book of Deuteronomy. We're starting a new book right now, Deuteronomy 1:1 to 3:22. And this one is called A Time for Peace. So first of all, now that you guys are all caught up, right? We are on the same Parsha schedule. Last week for you was Matot Maseh, for me it was Maseh. Now we are reading together the awesome Parsha. So I'm excited about that. The book of Deuteronomy is known as Mishneh Torah, meaning that it's almost like a Torah within itself. The book of Genesis is the root, while Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers are its branches. And this book right here is a more personal drash, I'd say, from the man who till this day is known as our rabbi. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu. That's his title. So why is Moses known as Moshe Rabbeinu and not Rabbi Moshe? The reason is because every single piece of Torah that we have studied since we received it on Mount Sinai began with Moses. He was the very first rabbi in the history of the world. And so every single time any one of us speaks, studies, teaches, interacts, or fulfills any mitzvah of the Torah, or the commands where they're in, we do so in the merit of Moses, who is still our current rabbi. We're talking about the very first rabbi and teacher in Israel. This is a big deal. The man who bested angels and was worthy of going up to the mountain of God and came down unscathed. The most humble man to have ever lived and the highest prophet to have ever walked the earth. So says the infallible word of God. Now, before we go on, I would just like to correct myself. I said something last week, I just have to straighten this out. Last week's video, I believe I said that right now is one day before Moses' death and about 30 days before the children of Israel enter into the land of Israel. That was incorrect. It's actually, the book of Deuteronomy begins at Rosh Chodesh Shvat. You could see it in the first few verses of the Parsha. I should have seen that. So we know that Moses died on his birthday, as all tzaddikim do. All the righteous individuals in the Torah die on their birthday or throughout life. And this signifies that they lived a perfect life according to their specific calling. So Moses' birthday was the 7th of Adar, and so he died on the 7th of Adar. So we know exactly when he died. Then it says that the children of Israel lamented over him or mourned over him for 30 days. Then they entered into the land of Israel. So roughly, I would say it's about Erev Pesach, right? It would be exactly 40 years that they would be in the wilderness from the time of the Exodus until the time of the passing over the Jordan into the land of Israel. So that would mark the 40-year mark. So now that we straighten that out, let's continue. So Moses is about to die, and before he goes, he's got some things, on his chest that he has to get off. So in fact, on all accounts, this is actually a rebuke, what Moses is doing. But not just any rebuke. It's actually the longest rebuke in the entire Torah. Now, granted, he's been with them from before they left Egypt, right? And he stood up for them. He interceded for them. He defended them. And he was willing to die for them over and over and over again for over 40 years. So you think the dude's got some gripes? I mean, probably. But let's not forget who we're talking about here. Because this book is dedicated to Moses. This is his personal account of the interpersonal relationships between him and the children of Israel. These are his viewpoints, his internal struggles as a flesh and blood man, and his love for God, the Torah, and God's people. And what does Moses do upon his deathbed? Okay, I mean, he's not actually on his deathbed, but this is his last will and testament. What does he do? He rebukes the children of Israel. Now, this too would seem somewhat out of character for Moses, the man of God. The reason is it's because it's not actually a rebuke per se, but rather a correction. It's a reminder for the sake of correction, if we will. This is not done out of anger, but out of love. This is not for the sake of tearing down, but for the sake of building up. This is not to bring division, but to bring peace. And this is how he begins his final words to us. So pay attention. Deuteronomy 1:1. Ele hadvarim. These are the things, These are the affairs, the stuff. Asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael be'ever hayarden, במדבר, בערבה, מול סוף, בין פרן ובין תופל ולבן וחצרות ודי זהב. Oh, right, sorry, English. These are the words which Moses spoke to all of Israel on the side of the Jordan, in the desert, in the plain, opposite the Red Sea, between Paran and Tofel and Lavan and Chatzarot and Dai Zahav. That's a lot of places, okay? So before we break this verse down, where do we know for a fact right now that Moses and the children of Israel were standing? Belvot Moab, in the plains of Moab. Now, how do we know this? Because look in last week's Parsha, last verse. These are the commandments and the ordinances that the Lord commanded the children of Israel through Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. So they were in the plains of Moab. So this is the last verse of the book of Numbers, Sefer Bamidbar. So right now the children of Israel are no longer in the wilderness. The time of the wilderness is done. They are out of the wilderness. God created this limbo for their sake, the particular wilderness. We discussed it last week. So first you have the Lord, and then you have his anointed who's speaking to Israel, because this is what God was saying in last week's Parsha, and now it's Moses' turn in the entire book of Deuteronomy. So another reason this book is called Mishneh Torah is because it's a complete recap of the three middle books of the Torah. It's going to go over case by case and point by point over here from a different viewpoint. This is how we get a much better understanding of all the things that we've learned. So now, let me ask you one question about Deuteronomy 1:1. Read the verse again, or we'll read it together. I kind of made it obvious with my hand gestures, but these are the words that Moses spoke to Israel on the side of the Jordan, in the desert, in the plain, opposite the Red Sea, between Paran and Tofel and Lavan and Chatzarot and Dai Zahav. Does this verse make sense? No, it does not make sense. Why does it not make sense? We know where they're standing, but that's not where it says that they are. In fact, you might recognize some of the names a little bit, while others no one has ever seen before. So how can Moses be standing in all these places at once? Well, the thing is, he can't because he's not. And then, how is this a rebuke? Where is this infamous rebuke? Do you see it? Does anyone see it? Oh, it's there. And we don't need to go further than Rashi, okay? Most of you know Rashi. He gives us a perfect understanding to this verse and all the locations mentioned. So let's look what he says. Ele hadvarim, these are the words or the affairs, the things, because these are words of reproof. And he is numbering here all the places where they provoked God to anger. Therefore, he suppresses all mention of the matters in which they sinned and refer to them only by a mere allusion, contained in the names of these places out of regard for Israel. He actually respected the children of Israel. He didn't come to beat them over the head. So do we understand what kind of honor Moses just gave Israel right here? He alluded to the sin, not by the act nor by the repercussions, but rather through a hint to the location in which it actually took place in. It's like a hint of a hint. And they understood him. 2, El Kol Yisrael, the words which he spake to all Israel. If he had reproved only some of them, those who were there, those who were then in the street, i.e. those who were absent, right? That's why it says all of Israel. Those who were absent might have said, you heard from the son of Amram, Moses, the son of Amram, and did not answer a single word regarding this and that. Had we been there, we would have given him an answer. So on this account, he assembled all of them, and he said to them, see, you are all here. He who has anything to say in reply, let him reply. Did anybody have anything to say? No, they did not. When you're hit with the truth and you're on that kind of a level, you accept it and you thank him for it. And by the way, when it says all of Israel, if you are all of Israel, this is for you too. So, again, who can answer Moses when he's speaking? 3, Bamidbar, in the wilderness. They, however, were not then in the wilderness, but in the plains of Moab, as we just discussed back in Numbers 36:13. What therefore is the meaning of Bamidbar? It doesn't mean that they were actually in the wilderness, but that they provoked God's anger when they were in the wilderness. That they said in Exodus 16:3, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord. 4, Ba'arava, in the plain, i.e., he reproved them regarding the plain, that they had sinned through Baal Peor at Shittim in the plains of Moab. This we could see in the end of Parashat Balak and the beginning of Parashat Pinchas. Another allusion to that. Mul Suf, what happened in Yam Suf, against Suf, i.e., he reproved them regarding that which they had shown themselves rebellious at the Red Sea. On their arrival at the Red Sea, that they had said in Exodus 14:11, it is because there are no graves in Egypt that thou hast brought us to die in the wilderness. And similarly, when they left the midst of the sea, as it is said in Psalms 106 verse 7, they murmured because of the sea at the Red Sea. 6. Ben Paran uben Tafel velavan, between Paran and Tofel and Laban. Rabbi Yochanan said, we have gone through the entire Torah, the entire Bible, and we have not found a single place with the name of Tofel or Laban. Okay, not talking about the man, we're talking about the actual place. But the meaning is that he reproved them because of the calumnious statements, taflo, that they had made regarding the manna which was white in color. Lavan is white in color. That they said in Numbers 21:5, and our soul loathes this bread. And because of what they had done in the wilderness of Paran through the spies. 7. En chatzerot, i.e. regarding what they had done there at the insurrection of where? Korach. Another explanation, he said to them, you ought to have taken a lesson from what I did to Miriam in Chatzerot because of the slander that she uttered against Moses. And yet you, even after that, spoke against the omnipresent, against God. Even though they spoke against Moses, Moses is God's man. You speak against Moses, you speak against God. One and the same. 8. Vidai Zahav, and enough gold. That's what that means. Now the name is taken in the sense of sufficiency of gold. He reproves them on account of the golden calf, which they had made in consequence of the abundance of gold which they had when they came out of Egypt, as it is said where? Hosea 2:10. And silver did I give them in abundance, and gold. They, however, made it into a bale. So, do we understand what's happening here? Now, come into my head just for a minute. Good luck with that. I'm going to emphasize this again. Think of your favorite author, okay? It could be Stephen King, Tom Clancy, Isaac Asimov, Harry Harrison, I don't know. Who wrote Dr. Seuss, whoever. So when you go into the bookstore and you want to pick up one of their books, you ask the clerk, excuse me, do you have Pet Sematary by Stephen King? Right? This is what we do. So in this case, it's us going to God and saying, excuse me, Lord, do you have Deuteronomy by Moses? Because that's exactly what that is. Throughout this entire book, except for a few verses in the end, God is no longer speaking through Moses, as was the case throughout the entire wilderness. This is Moses, the man, speaking directly to Israel. He is speaking to them as a prophet, as all the other prophets did. All the other prophets, God did not speak through them directly. God gave them the information in a dream or in a vision, and then they told it to the people as best they could. But Moses was the only one that God spoke directly through. So whenever he opened his mouth to the children of Israel, that was God speaking directly. Now is not like that, and it's a good thing. So he's speaking to them as one of the other regular prophets, as a leader, as a father, as a brother, and as a humble servant. And again, we can see this in the first few words of this book. These are the words which Moses spoke to all of Israel. This is Moses speaking to Israel on his own will and his own accord, his own words as well. Again, this was not done until now. I'm emphasizing this point. So whatever he's saying here, it actually carries a tremendous amount of weight as far as we're concerned. You see, we cannot comprehend God. We just can't. We're still part of the physical. We can't comprehend God. We cannot comprehend the heavens, the principalities and powers, the spirit realm. We can't. We just don't get it. But Moses did. So everything that is said in this book is more relatable to us. That's the reason for this book, is so we can better understand everything that was given to us until this point. When God spoke through Moses, Moses was in the balance between the heavens and the earth. He was the translator for God. Like we discussed, God showed him the patterns of the heaven, and Moses had to translate that to earthly matters, which is no simple task, yet he did. So why am I emphasizing this yet again, and it will happen again and again? So this particular message does not get lost on us. Because this particular topic is something that I personally struggle with, and looking at all y'all out there, I know that you struggle with this as well. So listen up. Proverbs 15, Solomon said, "A gentle rebuke turns away wrath, but a distressing word stirs up anger. Ma'ane rach yashiv chama, udvar etza ya'ale af." So remember that. Now it's question time. Now, whether you're watching this home alone by yourself, walking and just listening to it, if you're sitting around people, I want everybody to participate. Again, even if you're by yourself. This is not only for your sake, but for the purpose of peace. This is what this message is. And when we bring peace to the world, we are victorious over the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the adversary. So, in a show of hands, and please work with me here. Who has gotten angry at another person ever? Right? Right. Softball. Who has gotten angry at another person because of something the other person did? Who's gotten angry at another person because of something they did to you? Okay, I'm going to keep my hand up here right now. Who has gotten angry at another person because of something they did to another person? Who has gotten angry because of something the other person did was immoral? Who has gotten angry because something the other person did went against the word of God? Who has gotten angry because another person did something that was not immoral, did not go against the word of God, and had nothing to do whatsoever with you? Still up there. Who's gotten angry at a close friend, a brother, a spouse, a parent, a child, for reasons that were justified? Who has gotten angry at a close friend, a brother, a spouse, a parent, a child, for reasons that were not justified? Okay, now freeze. Look around the room, wherever you are. And if it's just you, then look at your hand, all right? What am I trying to show you here? We all suck. Everybody's hand should be up right now. Keep those hands in the air, though. Now continue to look around you. If there's even one of you whose arm is not tired from being raised right now, then you are not being honest with yourself. How can we work together if you're not being real? Not only with me, but with yourself. And even if you're sitting there by yourself right now. Why? So if your hand hasn't been raised this entire time, you may as well just get up and walk out the room right now. None of this is relevant to you. Clearly, you know everything. You're better than Moses, Jacob, David, Joshua. And if that's the case, then please teach me. I want to learn. But we know that you're not better than they. So let's learn from the most humble man to have ever lived, Moses. This is his book, from his heart. These are the words from his mouth. You can put your hands down now. And this is what he says, my loves. Now listen, this is going to confuse some of you, but listen anyway. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. Right? Now, if your brother does something and you make a public thing of it, are you doing what it is said? No, you are not. Fine. If he listens to you, you have gained a brother. Does this sound familiar? Wonderful. Now you know its origin. So when Moses came to his brothers, did he point out exactly what it is that they did in order to publicly shame them? No, he did not. What did he do instead? He hinted ever so slightly to them. So for what purpose? To chastise them or to educate them? And what's the purpose of education in the ways of the Torah? The purpose is so that we can become the living Torah. And when we become the living Torah, can we confidently say that I and the Father are one? Oh, yes. Are we understanding more a little bit now about the ways of God presented to us by the man Moses on a platter of silver and gold with incense that'll open the gates of heaven? This is Moses speaking on his own. And look at the peace that he brings. How can we be victorious if there's nothing to overcome? What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. No. I would not have known sin, but through the law. For I would not have known lust except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. Right? True statement? True statement. Do you see why anger is necessary? Do you see why resistance and struggle is necessary? It's the only way. It's the only way to live the Torah. That's it. If anything's done for you, you're not living the Torah. You don't let the anger rule you, but use it as a tool to elevate your spirit. If you don't have the do's and the don'ts, you stay right where you are. The do's and the don'ts are the mitzvot, the law, the commands. And we all know that right where you are is actually in a decline, because if you don't go up, you go down. There is no plateau. That's a ruse. You think, yeah, I'm comfortable where I am. Who's speaking right now? Every day that you don't try to better yourself, you start to fall away little by little. It's barely noticeable at first. And then next thing you know, you wake up one day, you're like, how did I get here? After everything that I've been through, after God lifted me up, after my entire climb, and now I'm back down. How did this happen? It doesn't just happen like that. You allow it to happen because you let up just a little bit. You start moving that red line that you say you'll never cross. You start moving it further. So technically speaking, you never crossed that red line because you just moved it. So who are you cheating here? Moses had to deal with this for over 100 years of his life. And so these are his words in his book. And the first thing he shows us is how to truly love one another. Look at his example. So now let's give you another scenario right here. Let's say that someone close to us, someone that we love, did something wrong. Okay? Truly wrong. What they did or are doing actually brings pain to themselves. Do we know a person like this? I'm sure we do. We all know a person like this, okay? Or several. Naturally, because of our love for them, we get angry on their behalf for their sake. So we come to them and we yell at them. What are you doing? What's the matter with you? What are you, stupid or this or that? Or even with harsh words. Now, if we do it like this, are they going to listen? Not if you yell at them. Not if you belittle them. Not if you shame them, or even if you point out what they did. That's not going to help. Because when you approach anyone like that, you're not doing it for their sake. You're doing it for your own sake. How so? What do I mean by this? Think about it like this. Because you can't stand to see them like this, it truly does bother you. You'd rather not feel the way that you feel because of how they feel. You get what I just said? So in your subconscious rationale, it's as if they stop doing this to themselves, I will stop feeling bad. You see? Two birds with one stone, right? Wrong. Just one fool with an agenda. Do you understand that the only way anyone will accept any kind of correction is when the person receiving it believes with their whole heart that the person giving it truly loves them? But that's still not even enough, not even close. How many times did I get rebuked or attempted to be corrected by those who I know for a fact loved me and I didn't listen, and vice versa. I've come to people that I love with my whole heart who have either done something wrong to me, themselves, or someone else and blasted them for what they did. So, was my purpose to correct or to rebuke? And who in God's name do I think that I am or have the authority to rebuke anyone in the name of anyone? And furthermore, let's say for argument's sake that the person did in fact sin according to the word of God, and for their own sake they have to repent, for them, not for me. If you approach them in any other way aside from 100% love, purity, and humility, then guess what? You just committed sin yourself. You are now a sinner. Do you understand how this works? But if you are true, and if you come to your brother according to the word of God in the utmost humility, then you just fulfilled the greatest mitzvah in the Torah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's why I don't pay any mind to, listen, there's some foolish things written in the comment sections over there. People love, I rebuke you, you're going to hell. Okay, no problem. You want to talk about it, first of all, do it properly, because right now you're already at fault. You are sinning yourself, right? Hey, you're a sinner, you come to me. Still waiting for that email, by the way. Anyway, you see, when your brother sins in their own personal life, does it affect you? Absolutely. How does it affect you? Because Kol Yisrael aravim ze bazeh. All of Israel are bound, responsible, tied to one another. Now, this is a phrase coined by the sages. And its original sense is that every single Jew bears responsibility for the observance of his friend, of his fellow. This responsibility has both moral and practical consequences. Rabbi Moshe Tzvi Neria defined it like this. He said, this type of language has molded us from ancient times. It is not just a fine mantra in this world, right? An idea of fairy tale that carries with it a rush of morality. That's not what this is. Because people love to throw that out there. Everybody's so self-righteous. Again, what I say to you, I say to myself. This is from me. You're just listening. Go out and check the sources. This is what he says. Go out and check the sources, comb through the Bible. And you will find that this is a solid foundation, a halachic building for the Father, according to the commands of God. And from there, a cornerstone of the entire Torah. And when you see it, you will find that the entire system of the Torah and mitzvot lies within these words. So again, a prime example of this is the half a shekel, which we discussed several times before. So when we come to correct our brother, it is not only for their sake, but for the sake of all of Israel and for the kingdom of heaven. This is what it is. This is so much bigger than what we think it is. So that's why when Moses does it, he's showing us exactly how to do it correctly. But if we don't do it correctly, then we are adding to the destruction rather than building of the kingdom. We're doing harm. But if we feel like we got to do it out of, that's selfishness. And then guess what? Look in the mirror. Then somebody has to come and correct us for improperly correcting the other guy. Then we get pissed off, right? We try to play it off as either constructive criticism or, I'm doing it in the name of God because it says this and that. Yeah, but what does it also say? How to approach. It's not only what you do, it's what comes behind it. It's what's in your heart. So who gave you the right? Who gave me the right? Does it not say, judge not, lest ye be judged? For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Exactly how you dish it out, that's what you're getting back. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, And look, a plank is in your own eye. Hypocrites, right? Hypocrites. First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Why did I just bring this to you? Look how sneaky I am. So, all those that know this, I just quoted the book of Matthew, right? New Testament. Why did I do this? Because I'm about to teach you some Talmud. You're going to get hand in hand, right? You want some of the dessert? You're going to have to eat your broccoli. Dip the broccoli in the whipped cream. It's okay sometimes. All right, so here it comes. And I want you all to see this. If you can stand it, stay with me for 5 minutes. Watch what happens. The sages taught in a Braita, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall rebuke your neighbor and do not bear sin because of him. This is from Leviticus 19:17. Okay? The Hebrew says, Lo tisna et achicha, you shall not hate your brother, bilevavcha, in your heart. Hochach tochiach, it says it twice, that you shall reprove or rebuke your brother 2 times. So why does this verse specify in your heart? One might have thought that the verse means do not hit him, do not slap him, and do not ruin him due to hatred. Therefore, the verse states in your heart. This teaches that the verse speaks of hatred in the heart, specifically. In other words, it's internal. From where it is derived with regard to one who sees an unseemly matter in another, that he is obligated to rebuke him? Great question. As it is stated, you shall rebuke hochach tochiach, your neighbor. If one rebuked him for his action, but he did not accept rebuke, from where it is derived that he must rebuke him again? Great question, rabbis. The verse states, you shall rebuke hochach tochiach, and the double language indicates he must rebuke in any case. This is Talmud, people. You're taking apart the verses of the Bible and you're asking all the questions around it. You're asking questions. One might have thought that one should continue rebuking him even if his face changes due to humiliation. Here we're getting into that, am I crossing the line, am I not? Therefore, the verse states, do not bear sin because of him. You would think it means something else. The one giving rebuke may not sin by embarrassing the other person. You see, you don't even know how you're approaching. If you cause them any kind of embarrassment, even if they don't see it, even if you don't see it, and even if they don't show it, you just sinned. This is what it means. Now check this out. It is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Tarfon says, he was from the house of Shammai, I would be surprised if there is anyone in this generation who can receive rebuke. Why? Because if one rebuking says to him, remove the splinter from between your eyes, i.e., rid yourself of a minor infraction, the other says to him, remove the beam from between your eyes, i.e., you have committed far more severe sins than I. Oh, goodness gracious. So how many individuals who have been reading from the New Testament know that the things that are actually taught there can be found in the Talmud and Halacha books? Did you know this right now? You're learning Talmud right now, but you'd think you're reading the book of Matthew. So let's go to its origin. More. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I would be surprised if there is anyone in this generation who knows how to rebuke correctly without embarrassing the person he is rebuking. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses before me that Akiva was lashed, Rabbi Akiva was lashed, punished many times on my account, as I would complain about him before Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel the Great. Yeah, we know who that guy is too. And all the more so, I thereby increased his love for me. This incident serves to affirm that which states, do not rebuke a scorner lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Proverbs 9:8. So since Rabbi Akiva was a wise man, the more he was rebuked, the more he loved that who rebuked him. I don't know anybody that's on that level today. A wise man wants to improve himself and loves those who assist him in that task. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon, asked his father, if one is faced with the choice of rebuke for its own sake or humility not for its own sake, which of them is preferable? His father said to him, do you not concede that humility for its own sake is preferable? As the master says, humility is the greatest of all the positive attributes. Remember that. The master says that humility is the greatest of all the positive attributes. If so, and they go on, humility not for its own sake is also preferable. As Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, a person should always engage in Torah and mitzvot, even if not for their own sake, i.e. without the proper motivation, but for ulterior motives. As through the performance of mitzvot, not for their own sake, one will come in the end to do them from their own sake. If you're practicing Torah and mitzvot, you are more likely to do things correctly. It'll already become part of you, part of your subconscious. So when you approach your brother, you'll already be on your way to doing it the right way, thereby saving your brother and not causing yourself to sin in the process. Now, a few things just happened. One, y'all just learned some Talmud. Gates of hell didn't open and your minds didn't explode. Two, y'all just learned some Talmud and you got a much better understanding of the things that you're reading, for instance, in the book of Matthew. It's okay. Shh. I won't tell anyone. It's between you and me. But now you know. And now you know that I know that you know. Number three, y'all just learned some Talmud, and now you see the origins of everything. This case being Leviticus. So if you don't understand Jewish thought, Jewish halacha, these are actual laws. This is from the Torah. This is the law. Okay? That many believe are done away with, yet it would completely contradict the premise and platform in which they were given if you don't understand the origin and reasoning behind the words that you supposedly live by. Think about what else you might be missing. Think about that. That right there is a terrifying thought. Peel those layers off, kids, one at a time. Whenever you're ready to receive whatever you're ready to receive. Now the truth is right here waiting for you. There's a very specific reason that the next verses right after this in Matthew are as follows. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. Replacement theology, anyone? Many are not ready to hear the truth, and so we are not called to cast anything. We don't come to strangers telling them to follow halacha. They'll take that, they'll throw it right back at us. This is what is done. That's why we don't do this. We are called to be a light, and those who have the true light of God and Messiah inside them are drawn to this truth. Everybody else is comfortable where they are. No problem. We don't preach at anyone. It's not our way. What are we? The church? Messianic Judaism? No, we don't do that in Judaism. We give answers by asking questions. The Talmud is all about questions to show you how to think, to give you every single aspect and every angle of everything that is written in the Torah. That's what the Talmud is. It breaks down the Torah and it asks questions so you can ask those questions. Why do we ask questions? So the truth can come from within you and not from an outside source. My pastor said this. My fake rabbi said that. So you're going to blame it on them if you're living incorrectly? No. You ask questions until they can't answer it anymore, and then you go find somebody that can answer your questions. We don't tell you how to live or condemn you if you don't live that way. All we can do is show you the word of God, and the rest is up to you. That's what I'm attempting to do here. This is what it says, take it or leave it. That's it. So, who wants it? Who wants the truth? Next verse. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, it will be opened. So, if you don't understand this very basic explanation, let's try looking at it backwards. If you haven't received what it is that you need, supposedly, it's simply because you have not asked. If you haven't found your answers, it's because you have not asked the proper questions. And if the doors are shut, ask yourself this question. Have you been knocking? Knock harder until your knuckles bleed. And 4, as the Master says, humility is the greatest of all the positive attributes. And that's why, yet again, my friends, I bring you back to the most humble man that has ever lived, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our rabbi. And so, my dear friends, with Tisha B'Av only a few days away, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, we remember the destruction of both the first and second temples of God. It is said that he who does not mourn and lament with Jerusalem in times of sorrow will not rejoice with her in times of peace. And that peace of Jerusalem that seems to be more than not more than a fancy tagline today, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That's not even what the verse says, but never mind. That peace will only happen when Messiah comes and the third temple is built. So, if you haven't been there during the struggle, during the wilderness, during Jacob, during Israel, do you really think that you're going to be there for the big party, for the banquet? That's when the doors are shut and many, and it says many, will be left outside. The first temple was destroyed because the leaders of Israel failed to properly rebuke the people in regards to sexual immorality and idolatry. They saw the children of Israel not living according to the Torah, and they did not know how to rebuke them. They didn't know how to do it properly. Maybe they did it improperly. And then they just added on to the sin, to the collective sin of Israel. While the second temple was destroyed for baseless hatred amongst brothers. What we learn here from Moses, in the first verse of the Parsha, and we didn't get past the first verse of the Parsha, so now you know the first verse of the Parsha, we learn just how to conduct ourselves. Will we fail? You can bet your ass we will. But is it going to stop us from trying? Not now and not ever. Never underestimate the power of planting a seed. You do your best, your very best, and God, He'll take care of the rest. So I'd like to close this class with a request. As we all saw earlier, with a show of hands, we are all guilty. Every last one of us. So again, there's nothing to be ashamed about, okay? We all have a struggle in this particular area, and this is why it's so important to try and rectify this. So I want you all to look at your brother, look at your sister, and understand that you are actually looking at yourself. They are you, and you are them. You cannot love them as yourself if you don't love yourself. And how can you love yourself? If you can't love yourself, then how can you love God, who brought you into this world in this particular time? It's all related. If you don't love God, you can't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor, you cannot fulfill this mitzvah, you cause chaos. Now is the time for reconciliation. In this particular aspect, now is the time for peace. Understand that you are human, you are flawed. And yet, you were created so that you can overcome. Everyone who's listening, everyone who hears this message, this is a call to action right now. So I humbly ask that each and every one of you go to one person, just one, we'll start with one, that you have rebuked or attempted to rebuke at any point in time, and apologize. Have a conversation. Even if what they did was absolutely wrong, doesn't matter. Because you know that your heart was not pure the way it should have been. You go to that person, you apologize. You tell them with an open and exposed heart just how much you love them, and that your anger and frustration got the better of you. There are no buts in apologies. You tell them that you are there for them no matter what, and that they can turn to you for help at any point in time. Love is patient, love is kind, right? We all mourn together in these darkest of days, and only we have the power, because it was placed in our hands, to turn things around. Through peace and love, we will hasten the coming of Mashiach, and may we all live to see his day arrive. So as always, friends, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and have a meaningful fast. See y'all. Bye-bye.